Barrett Sallee is with us, college football writer at CBS Sports, does a lot of stuff in terms of watching Braves baseball. We'll talk about the Braves maybe a little bit later. Barrett, it's good to talk to you, man. So let's start with this, because I was going over your Twitter account, and you tweeted out one of the articles up at CBS Sports. It's not an overreaction. It's not a hot take. Florida State really is that good. Walk us through what you watched yesterday, and is this legitimate that Florida State is going to push for a national title, maybe a championship?
Yeah, it is. I picked them to go to the playoffs before the season, and I picked Jordan Travis to win the Heisman, and it was because that's a complete football team with weapons all over the place. And I think you got a really good glimpse of just how complete that team is, because in the first quarter, first half, really, they let Jordan Travis let it loose instead of running the football. In fact, I think on the broadcast, Fowler and Herbie even said, where's the running game? And Mike Norvell, I think, came in with a game plan to feature the wide receivers, Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman specifically, because it opened up those lanes on the ground in the second half. But I think the most interesting part, guys, is the fact that Keon Coleman was the star. Johnny Wilson's the best wide receiver on that team. And the fact that Keon emerged, now it opened up a whole different world, because you can't double both of those guys. So there are so many options now for Mike Norvell, and you saw just how good of a play caller he was in that second half. And that's something that has followed him throughout his career, both at Florida State and at Memphis. So to me, it's the full package. And another thing, and I wrote this in my story, and I don't think it's been discussed enough. There were 6 different players that had a half tackle for loss or more. Not one of them is named Jared Verse. And championship caliber teams have to have 8 or 9 guys up front to rotate, and Florida State's got that. So it's got the complete recipe for any team that can win a college football playoff. And, overall talent, you go look at my colleague Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio. Florida State's not in the blue chip ratio. It's just outside. However, it's extremely, extremely experienced. And I think that makes up for not a deficiency in talent, but just not where the best of the best are right now.
Barrett, love your report card on CBSSports.com. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Couple of teams that you gave A-pluses to, and just kind of give me a brief thought on why you ranked them that high. Alabama was one of them. Washington, I know they destroyed
Boise,
thank you. And, of course, you mentioned the Florida State one. But Bama and Washington, tell me your thoughts on both those two teams.
Well, what was the concern about Bama going in? The
quarterback. Yep.
What happened? Jalen Milroe happened. He counted for 5 touchdowns. So, when you look at Alabama, there are some other questions, I guess, like maybe not a go-to receiver yet, things like that. But they're minor issues, because Jalen Milroe can make up for some of that with his legs. So you're not going to have the downfield threat that Bryce Young, that had, and Nick Saban even said they became too Bryce heavy last year and 2 years ago for that matter. So I think the goal is to not necessarily stretch the field, and you have Jalen Milroe to help negate, or at least pick up that slack. So, Alabama, they answered the biggest question. And then Washington, I thought Boise State was going to put up a fight. That was a 14-point spread, and that game was over by the beginning of the second quarter. Michael Penix, I think everybody saw just how good he is. And I think looking back, guys, that Boise State team is actually going to be pretty darn good and might even contend for a New Year's Six bowl game. So, it kind of got lost a little bit in the shuffle because, people were paying attention to other things. The hangover from the Colorado TCU game was sort of in effect, but that Washington team is legit, and I think that win is going to look better and better as the season goes on.
By the way, Barrett's a hard grader. Oregon, I think, dropped 10 million points in their game and only got a B+. So we got to watch out.
All right. Go ahead. All right. So my personal made-up rule. It's my story, so I make up my own rules, right? If you don't play an FBS team, you can't get an A.
Oh, okay.
That's just the rule.
All right, I like it. That makes sense. Then 81-7, of course, the final score there. All right, so let me ask you this. I wanted to bring this back to Florida State really quickly, because we have seen in years past that even if you get a run to a national championship, of course, last year being the one that is in most recent memory, there is still a very clear and obvious gap between, the others, we'll call them, and then, of course, the team that in these last few years has been the pinnacle, which is Georgia. What is that gap like between Florida State and Georgia? Should they make this run, how much can they make up that gap if it's still there for the Bulldogs and everybody else that they're taking on?
Well, I wouldn't say it's significant. It's there. Is it the size of the Grand Canyon? No. Is it the size of the Chattahoochee River? Maybe. I think it's one of those things where, Georgia still lacks a little bit of experience, which is something that Florida State boasts. But I think we all know just how high the ceiling is for Georgia, especially if Carson Beck develops into a superstar. So it's there, but I think Florida State is good enough, to me anyway, where they put together 60 minutes, they can beat anybody, right? They can at least get to that point. And so that's one of those things that I think, people kind of forget. Yeah, Georgia's a better team than Florida State. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But could Florida State be a better team on any given day? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can put it together and have 60 good minutes and win a national championship.
By the way, if you're wondering where the Chattahoochee River is, that is in Georgia, and it runs from north to south there.
Okay, thank you, because I was wondering.
I like the analogy there. Barrett, I want to go to my team, the Ohio State Buckeyes. You gave them a C+. I got no problem with that grade, but tell me why you came out with that letter on them.
Well, because, you needed to see something from Kyle McCord, right? I think there are two ways to look at it. And Tom Luganville and I discussed this on SiriusXM Channel 84 yesterday. The defense playing well is probably more important than Kyle McCord not playing well. So I think that, but still, you need to have a quarterback who can light up Indiana, and Kyle's not that. So I think Ryan Day kind of scrambled a little bit. He wanted Kyle to come out. He tried to give him a lot of the playbook to make him comfortable, and it didn't happen. And so they went into halftime and kind of settled down, made some adjustments, and simplified things. And Kyle played He played okay in the third quarter. You can't live like that. It's okay to do it, in a few games per year, but you can't live like that. And so that happened in the first game. His second start, but the first game as the real starter, it's a little concerning.
I get your point on McCord. I'll tell you what, though, for me, the big concern if you're Ohio State and Ryan Day was the offensive line. I thought Indiana looked like Penn State's defensive front against them. I don't know how good or bad the Hoosiers are going to be defensively this year, but to me, that's the bigger concern when I look at Ohio State right now.
It's a concern. There's no doubt about it. I think it's with all those weapons, though, I think you can game plan around it most of the time. You have to be able to do it against the big boys, and you're not going to be able to do that, but you have 10 more games before you play Michigan. So I think for Ohio State, but we've seen great coaches. I wouldn't say game plan around that for an entire season, but they know how to get past it and develop ways to sort of negate that. But I hate this cliche, but it is true. You improve the most from weeks 1 to week 2, and they got Youngstown State, so that's a pretty easy transition. So we'll see what happens this weekend.
I'm surprised you guys haven't mentioned the biggest issue, which is Devin Brown wearing number 33 as a quarterback.
Oh my God, that drove me crazy.
Oh, but it's Sammy Baugh. It's Sammy Baugh. But look, it's weird.
Barry, you're not even older than me. Stop it, please.
He's like 20 and he's paying tribute to Sammy Baugh, Barrett. That's an issue.
On.
It's weird. Devin Gardner wearing 98 back in the day was worse.
Yeah.
That was just awful.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
that's a good
true.
call. All right, we're burying the lead, so I'll ask you the question that I asked them all. Was that win over over TCU more about Colorado or TCU?
It was still Colorado. TCU's not nearly as good as it was last year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They lost too much. But I think for Colorado, it wasn't really a secret what they were doing. They were letting Shedeur rip it. Travis Hunter was doing everything, and Dylan Edwards was, it was the center point on the running game. Like that's what everybody thought going in. I don't think anybody expected it to work that well. So, but it did, and that's something they can build off of. I said before the season, and I think, Amal, you were on our show the offseason. You might have said it too, that Colorado's 3.5 is probably too high for their win total. And now, to me, because of what we saw, because TCU knew what was coming and couldn't do anything about it, Colorado's a bowl team. And TCU, it's I think defensively they kind of got caught up in a whirlwind. And kind of guys, you go back, they've lost 3 of their last 4 games and played in the national championship game. All 4 of those, in reality, their defense really, really struggled. So I'm not going to say they didn't deserve it last year. They did, but I think defensively they've got some issues that they really didn't work out at the end of last season and really didn't address or haven't addressed to the point where they can contend this year.
Barrett, we got last minute with you here really quickly. Can Travis Hunter keep this workload up over 120 snaps for 12 games?
No. They better have like 10 cryo beds in that place where like the tanning bed things where you freeze yourself for like 3 minutes. If this keeps up, he's going to have to do it for an hour at a time, which, there's no way.
Yep.
Barrett, I got a quick question for you. My boss is going to get mad at me, but what else is new? So, have you already started chilling the champagne for October? What's going on? Your Braves scored about 1 million runs. Acuna finalized the MVP, and now you guys look like you might actually go back-to-back or whatever the hell you guys are doing, just winning.
Yeah, so I've got a pickup truck, so I've got all the champagne, like the ice is already, sitting there. I've got bags of ice. I'm dumping them out. I'm trying, like every day I kind of drive to the drive-through liquor store, and I'm like, hey, fill it up with another bottle because we're going to have a lot of fun this September and October, so it's getting to that point, yeah.
Drive-through liquor store. I got to check out one of those. Barrett Sallee, CBS Sports. Barrett, really enjoy your work. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks, y'all. See you.
Thank you.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.